All right, so we have the DNA Stage 2 kit installed, as you guys saw in previous videos. We're gonna rip this apart, start moving around some of the wiring, mock up what we think we'll have to move, start removing the front end here, and see some of the modifications we need to do for the ram air kit. The airbox removed, now we'll start to clean up this area here and take apart the whole front end to start mocking up some of the parts and see what we need to do with the wiring harness. This will be the biggest thing we spend time on, is trimming up this harness, cleaning it up, and all the extra brackets here to get the ram air to fit right into the airbox. So let's start with taking the cluster off, removing the fairing stay. Okay, once that's exposed, we have the two bolts here holding in the plastic trim, and then on each side down here, and that should remove this whole cover, giving us access to removing the fairing stay down here. All right, and now we have access to the nuts holding the fairing stay here. And we'll start, before we pull that off, we'll start to pull some of the wiring harness off here. All right, if you look closely on the frame there, we move the wiring harness. There's this notch here holding in the fairing stay. So we'll lift it up to pull it out. All right, so what we're gonna do here now, since we have the whole front end removed, next steps are cleaning up everything in this area where we want the air duct to. I got a little ahead of myself here, but you unclip the wires from this bracket here. I wanted to see if I could retain the section up top here. I was able to break this clean off from the top section that bolts up here on the frame. Now we just have the clutch cable that's held on here and the zip tie down below, but this is all removable. There's a clip right here and the zip tie. So take off this bracket, and then from there we'll start to cut some of the wire loom here and see what we can separate as clean as possible. All right, so start cleaning this up. I'm gonna go ahead and unplug everything up top here.
And we can start feeding it down. Trim any zip ties.
And that exposes the little cover for it. There's a little clip here that you want to depress. Other ones on the bottom and they'll slide right out. So we'll do the same on the other side. This one's very important compared to these. This is like the brake switch, horn and everything, if I remember correctly, but this side is your switch for the clutch to sense if you're holding in the clutch or not. And we want to make sure we put all these wires back in the same order to not risk the quick shifter or auto blipper not working. So hopefully you can see the color coding there. Between what's left and what's right. On the throttle side, throttle and brake side, you have the 2 connector harness. On the clutch side, you have 1 connector and the 4 pins or whatever plugs for the clutch switch, and a mix of both. Let's cut this zip tie. On both sides, you have between the horn and brake switch. So these will want to tape up and not reuse. All right, so I taped off the connectors in the harness that we're not going to care for, so we can prioritize the stuff we'll reuse. Now it's easy to pull this in here, and from here where it splits between the ignition cables and your front controls, we're gonna grab a razor blade, split this as careful as possible, and then come down here and start branching out the harness to how we want it to lay out here. And this is where we can really clean it up. And to keep it organized, either use zip ties or electrical tape to keep it separated for now, before we clean it up and put some wire loom back on it. Looks like some of these are already separated. Yeah, nice. And some of them, all right, this can go on that side. Looks like one wire branches over from both, and when we strip it, let's see, maybe we're very lucky and it's not one of the wires that we need, like one of these. So you guys get the idea. I'm gonna cut the video for now and start continuing to strip this harness, and then I'll show you how they look once they're all unraveled. All right, so we've spent a few minutes here organizing the wiring. I didn't go too crazy with it just yet, but just wanted to separate every plug that we have. This is the stock, well, this is the air temp sensor. Then you have a few of the plugs and the clutch switch wiring. I already mixed them up between left and right, so that's my mistake. I have my assumptions, but nonetheless, I'm gonna figure that out. The connector ports for these are different between left and right, so not an issue there. And remember, this one white wire, or this one wire that bridged across to the other side of the harness here, there is one that piggybacks off of the pins here, which I am assuming is the brake switch going to the clutch switch up here. I am gonna take a gamble and say that I don't need to run that for the blipper. If I do, I'll have it. I'll probably still wire it forward, but for now I'm kind of separating it from the batch here. All right, so the piece we're gonna start with is the splitter, and the nut inserts are facing, I believe, up. So here I have the clutch cable. You'll want to make room for that to squeeze this in. All right, so I took this bracket off of the ram air so we can set it up here first. This is just a 5mm and 13. I'm going to feed everything in the same way we took it off, so the bolts were on this side and the nut was on the other.
Yeah, see, right off the bat, I don't know if this will fit. See, it doesn't fit good below here, so the clutch cable will probably sit above.
You have two on the top, one on the bottom. The two on the top is with the washer.
And I'm just gonna leave them a little loose till we tighten everything up.
Hey guys, back on the bike. It didn't film everything where we left off, but we got a lot of progress done. All the wiring is ran. So we ended up putting everything together to figure out the best way to route the wiring. And here, with the air duct in, with the airbox and all, it was too tight to keep everything up here in the same way it goes from the factory. So we kept the clutch cable below, which is honestly tight as it is. Our ignition wire here on the side. Then all of our wiring that goes to the switches and sensors up front, I ran it below the frame piece here and the radiator. So you'll see all of that. There's a ton of space here, and I had zip ties just like factory before we took those zip ties off. For example, this harness here, it was zip tied to the frame there, lifting it above the radiator so it's not resting on that, putting extra heat in the wire. So these should be fine. If this harness is there, these should be perfectly fine. We have the two plugs here that go into this switch. Then on this side, we have a few more. The clutch switch, one plug that goes into this switch, and then the air temp sensor. And I do have, I put this all together, the horn and brake switch and stuff like that. Right now that's just being zip tied here, and that one wire that we saw from the clutch switch to the brake switch, it seemed like. So I have that all together, bundled here, and hopefully we don't need to add that fourth wire to the switch here, and we can forget about it. And then this I'll tuck under the airbox once all tested that it's working. Wiring wise, everything fit and reached except for the air temp sensor. Here we had to extend this wire a couple inches. It was probably reaching here and not enough for it to come out and plug in this way without any tension on it. So plug this in, extended the wire a healthy amount here, and this I have routed on the inside of the fork compared to everything else on the outside of the fork. I'll probably zip tie this a little loose to stay here so it doesn't accidentally catch its way here in between the fork and frame or anything like that. All the wiring here, I have everything kind of tucked just on this corner, and that fit perfectly fine with the airbox mounted here and that rubber air duct put in place here, right? I didn't cut the hole yet in the airbox. That's what we're gonna do up next. I didn't catch this on video, but we went ahead and plugged the top of the airbox cover there, both sides. There's like these snorkels that you'll see, had to trim them. All I did was took a Dremel from the top section here and cut it out as best as possible. Then you have these tabs here that hold them in place, had to cut that as well. And then gave it a little bit of paint in here because I did scratch it up when I had the like a hand saw cutting those tabs off to complete the job. And then I put a little RTV in there so it seals up nice and tight, doesn't go anywhere, and keeps, you know, all the pressurized air in the airbox here. So didn't film it. This was simple with a Dremel to cut out and put these on. Next up, we want to cut the lower airbox housing here to be able to fit this in. There's a template that they give us. Mount that up. You can put the bolts in there, and now you have an idea where you need to cut to be able to fit this piece. So that's the next thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to figure out a way to cover this section up here because I don't want any debris kicking over. Trying to limit the amount of mess I make in here with the Dremel cutting up the plastic. But let's go ahead and cut this up. All right, so we cut this up pretty good, as close as possible to this. Shaved it down, tried to get rid of any loose pieces here as much as possible. Hit it with the air gun, make sure it's all clean. What I ended up using to make sure nothing carries over too much into here was just the stock air filter, because I don't plan on using that again. Next, we'll try fit this into the hole here, and then we'll have the airbox portion complete. All right, so this is the finished product now. Fits nice and clean in there. This was tough to put on if you try to be careful, but it's very flexible. Once you realize how flexible it is and you force it in there with a screwdriver, the same way you're doing a tube change on a bicycle in that sense, if it's a lot easier than trying to go side by side, corner by corner. First I fit this side here without any of these notches, then I took the screwdriver, put it in here, and started wedging this stuff in, and it fit really well. I also wanted to make sure this was as tight as possible, so I threw in a flashlight there to see if there's any gap between the seal plastic and this tunnel here. And I ended up putting a little bit of RTV silicone there on the bottom just to get a better fit, make sure there's no air leaking. Unfortunately, I did have a small gap there for whatever reason. I give this one more good clean, and then the next hurdle will be putting on the airbox here and connecting it here, and seeing how the fitment is, and we go from there. All right, we got everything fitted in place. This fit easy, but the fitment isn't the best, to be honest with you. No matter how I tried, there's still a gap up here. Hopefully you can see that clearly. That small gap right there is between the air duct and the ram air. The bottom fit good. It's just that top gap there, and that's enough. If you could see light on it, then that's enough for there. So I wish this was a little bit of a tighter fit over here. If you put your fingers through, if it's perfect off the bike, right? But if you fit your fingers through to make sure it's fully sealed around, top and sides fits really good. The bottom definitely doesn't push this all the way in or go all the way into mate seal to seal. I'm sure that's causing part of it. I don't know if it's because I have the clutch cable here, but I did try, you know, with a screwdriver, lifting this piece up, pushing this in this way. Nothing helped there. Made everything loose up front and this duct here to try to get it to fit better, but still a little bit off. And it is what it is at this point. I'll try to play around with it a little later. Fitting these were fine. Everything here fit, but these are a little off, so you got to kind of push it and maneuver a little bit to fit this all as best as possible. Next, we'll put the cap on. We'll start to mount the dash and go from there. With everything bolted up in the airbox, next up we have the cluster. And I did take this loose, so we'll tighten this bracket up. We'll fit on the cluster here. These are just ears for the fairings. I am gonna go ahead and thread locker everything. This way it doesn't come loose from vibrations. This fits up nice here. Once this is mounted, we'll go ahead, put the cluster, wire everything back up. And one thing I forgot to do is grab these off of the stock fairing stay. These are little grommets here you put into this fairing stay to keep the cluster from shaking. Fit nice and snug in there. Hopefully we can tighten this up without having to remove it back again, because it is a little tight on the opposite side.
And thankfully these are Allen, not like a Phillips head or something, so we will be able to get to them as it sits.
So just wrapped up the fitment on the front end. Fit pretty good. No major complaints. Up here, to get it to seat perfect, you gotta push on the ram air. Push it up so this part can fit here. That's fine, no big deal there. Finagle it a little bit to get the ears to line up with this, but that seated pretty well. Just your typical stuff for, you know, first time fitment. I did have some trouble lining up this side more than the other initially. Then once I bolted everything up, you know, it took me a little bit. I had to get this one in first, then this one fit, and everything lined back up. I ended up having to drill part here, so this is snug versus before. This fit okay without any hardware here, but that's fine. It was it had some play anyway without that. And same on the other side. This side lined up a lot better from the start, but same thing. This was already loose, but I didn't have any fitment issues before the ram air, but ended up having to fit on another Zeus fastener here just to get it a little more clean and tidy, or else this would have definitely came loose on the with some air hitting it. For the wiring up here, it was all zip tied together, and end up drilling one more hole here, put a zip tie so it's sitting here, you know, still can move up and whatnot. I don't want it glued to the fairing in that sense, but I couldn't think of anything better, and I don't want to mount it to the fork. From the, you know, rider's perspective, looking up here, this looks very, very clean. The hardware, the here to fit the screen, all of that looks very professional, and you get the nice Trident Cycles logo here front and center.